Chosen one. Put your hand over the exact place in your chest where you have carried this. You know the place. It has had a name in your body for longer than you have had a name for it in your mind. Something ended, and a part of you still does not fully believe it ended, because every other time you thought a chapter was closed, it found a way to reopen wearing a different face, a different job, a different person, the same exact ache underneath. That is not you being unlucky. That is not you being weak. There is a reason an ending holds the first time and quietly comes undone the second time, and almost no one has ever shown you what that reason actually is. You are the one this message was written to find, not because you are special in the way people use that word carelessly, but because you are the one still checking, quietly, whether it is really over. You reread the last message. You notice the silence and wonder if it means peace, or if it means the story is only pausing. That checking is not paranoia. It is a very old, very accurate instinct, and by the time we are finished, you will finally know what it has been trying to tell you. Here is what happens in the next few minutes. First, you will understand why some endings stay closed while others quietly reopen, in a way that will make you look back at your own life differently before this message is even finished. Second, you are going to feel something shift in your body, not later, but as we go, because this is not a lecture, it is an activation. Third, you will walk away with something you can actually do today, something that costs nothing and requires nothing purchased, that begins closing the door for good. There is a signal the body gives off the exact moment an ending is not actually finished. Almost no one has ever been taught to read it. By the time we reach the middle of this message, you will read it instantly, in yourself and in the people around you. I want to give you a taste of this right now. Not the whole thing, just enough that you feel it is real. Most people carry one obvious wound from that old chapter. A memory, a name, a room. But there is a second, quieter wound sitting directly underneath the first one, and it has almost nothing to do with what actually happened to you. It has to do with a switch inside you that was flipped off long before that chapter ever started, and the chapter simply proved it was off. That is the shape of it. Not one wound, two. And the reason it felt like it ended and then quietly did not is that only one of those two switches ever got turned back on. We are going to open both in order, because order is the entire secret, and almost nobody has ever told you that either. If any part of what I just said landed somewhere true in you, place the word "here" beneath this message, where you are listening right now. Not because I need to hear it, because naming it out loud, even privately, even just to yourself, is the first small act of the closing we are about to walk through together. Now, before we go further, I want you to know what kind of person actually finds their way to a message like this one. It is never an accident. There are 5 quiet signs that someone is walking the path of the chosen ones, and if even 2 of these describe you, keep listening, because what comes next was built for exactly this kind of person. The first sign is this: you have felt, more than once, a pull towards something larger than your daily routine, a sense that your life carries a weight and a purpose that the people around you cannot quite see, even when you cannot name it precisely yourself. That pull is not vanity, it is memory. Something in you remembers a version of your life that has not happened yet, and it keeps tapping you on the shoulder at inconvenient hours. The second sign is a strange kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with sleep. You can rest for 8 hours and still wake up carrying a low, static hum of tiredness, because the tiredness was never physical to begin with. It was the sound of a mind working overtime to hold together a story that no longer fits who you actually are underneath it. The third sign is that endings keep finding you before you go looking for them. Doors close on their own. People leave without a real explanation. Jobs, relationships, whole seasons simply stop, almost as if something behind the scenes is clearing a path, whether or not you asked for it to be cleared. The fourth sign is a discomfort with easy comfort. You have tried the shortcuts everyone else swears by, the quick fixes, the surface-level advice, and something in you always sensed it was thin, that it was decoration over a problem it never actually touched. The fifth sign is the one that matters most today. You keep circling back to endings. You wonder if the last one really counted. You reread old messages, you notice silences, you ask yourself quietly whether this time it will actually stay closed. That circling is not weakness. It is the most accurate instinct you have, because deep down you already know that most endings you have lived through were only half finished. If 2 or more of those 5 signs are true for you, what comes next in this message is going to matter more than almost anything you have listened to this year. Stay with me. There is a reason those 5 signs cluster together in the same kind of person, and it has nothing to do with luck or chance. It has to do with 2 frequencies inside you, both installed when you were very young, both switched into the wrong setting by the time the world finished raising you, and both still running in the background of every ending you have ever tried to close. Most people never learn this, so they keep trying to solve a 2-part problem with a 1-part solution. They journal about the pain, but the static stays. They forgive the person, but the exhaustion stays. They change the job, the city, the relationship, and for a while it feels like relief. And then, quietly, the same shape returns, wearing a new face. I call the first one the decline effect, not because a textbook handed me that phrase, but because that is exactly what it looks like from the inside. A bright and curious part of you quietly going dim, while everyone around you calls it simply growing up. You did not lose your wonder because you got older. You lost it because a switch got turned down slowly, over years, by exactly the kind of conditioning nobody warns a child about. That switch has a name, and later in this message you will hear the full shape of it, because until you see it clearly, you cannot ever turn it back up. And there is a second switch, quieter than the first, that almost nobody talks about at all. It is the reason good things arrive in your life, and you find yourself deflecting them without meaning to, saying no before you have even decided, handing back a compliment like it does not belong to you, feeling a strange discomfort whenever ease shows up instead of struggle. 2 switches, 2 different reasons you feel unfinished. And here is the part that changes everything once you actually see it. They do not turn back on in just any order. One has to wake up before the other one can open. Get the order wrong, and you will spend years turning the second switch every direction you can think of, and it will not move, because the first one was never actually on to begin with. This is the entire secret behind why some endings hold and others quietly reopen. It was never about trying harder. It was never about deserving it more. It was always about sequence, and almost nobody has ever explained that to you until this exact moment. Stay with me, because we are about to open the first switch together, right now, using nothing but attention and a single memory you already have. There is no product, no purchase, nothing required for what comes next. This part is simply yours. Bring back one ordinary moment from before you turned 8 years old, not a big one. A doorway you used to walk through, the smell of a particular room, the weight of afternoon light falling across a floor. Hold it gently for the length of one slow breath and notice what happens in your chest. That small flicker you just felt is not nostalgia, and it is not memory in the way you usually think of memory. It is the first frequency, still there, still intact, waiting under everything you built on top of it since. You did not lose it. You only stopped listening to it. Hold on to that feeling, because it matters more than it seems right now. Everything else in this message is going to build on top of exactly what you just felt, and by the end, you are going to understand precisely why that feeling faded in the first place. and precisely what has been quietly blocking the second half of this from ever completing on its own. There is a name for what happens when both of these frequencies finally move in the right order, one after the other, never the second, before the first. It is not a slogan. It is closer to a diagnosis, the kind a person carries around for years without ever hearing anyone say it out loud. We are going to name it properly, together, starting now. There is one more thing worth understanding before we move deeper into the rest of this message. Something about why an ending can feel so different depending on which frequency was actually restored underneath it. Some endings feel clean immediately, almost effortless, because the situation itself never demanded much from either frequency to begin with. Other endings feel like they should be clean, by every outward measure, and yet something in you keeps quietly checking, over and over, whether it really is finished. That second kind of ending is the one this entire message exists to address, not the easy endings, the stubborn ones, the ones where you have done everything anyone ever told you to do, and some part of you still will not fully let go, still keeps one hand on the door even after walking through it. I think of a phrase worth sitting with slowly here. An ending is not measured by what stopped happening on the outside. It is measured by what stopped happening on the inside. Two people can experience the exact same external event, a breakup, a job loss, a difficult diagnosis resolving, and one of them will feel genuinely, permanently free of it within months, while the other will still feel its weight years later, even though nothing about the external facts differs between them. That difference has almost nothing to do with how strong either person is, and almost everything to do with which internal frequencies were actually addressed during that season. The person who feels permanently free almost always restored both frequencies, whether or not they ever had language for what they were doing. The person still carrying the weight almost always addressed only one, often without realizing a second one was ever involved at all. Here is something worth asking yourself honestly about your own particular ending, the one this entire message was written to speak to. Did the visible, external part of it end? Very likely yes, or you would not have been drawn to a message with this exact title in the first place. Now, ask the harder question. Did the quiet, internal part of it end as fully as the visible part did? Or does some part of you still brace, still check, still wonder whether it will find its way back somehow? If your honest answer is that the internal part still feels unfinished, even while the external part is genuinely over, I want you to hear something clearly. That gap is not evidence you are broken, and it is not evidence that you failed to heal properly. It is evidence, simply and precisely, that one of the two frequencies we have been describing this entire message is still waiting to be addressed. And now, for the first time, you actually know which one, or which two, and in what order. I want to return, for a moment, to the exact promise carried in the words that brought you to this message. It is over, and you will never have to go through that again. I want to be completely honest with you about what that promise can and cannot mean, because honesty matters more here than making you feel good in the short term. No message, no audio, no practice can promise you that painful things will never happen to you again. Life will still bring hard seasons. That is simply the honest truth of being alive, and anyone who promises otherwise is not being straight with you. What can genuinely change, permanently, is your relationship to those hard seasons, whether they hook back into the exact same old wound every single time, or whether they pass through you the way weather passes through a landscape, felt, real, and then gone, without reopening a chapter that has actually, finally closed. That is the honest shape of the promise underneath this entire message, not a life without difficulty. A life where difficulty no longer automatically drags you back into the same old story, because the two frequencies that used to make that story so sticky have finally been restored in order completely. Hold that distinction closely as we continue, because it is the difference between a promise that could never actually be kept and a promise that is entirely realistic, tested, and available to you starting today, regardless of anything else in this message. There is one more angle worth exploring here, something about why this particular restoration tends to matter more in certain seasons of life than others. If you are currently in a season that feels unusually heavy, more endings than usual, more doors closing in a short span of time, that clustering is not a coincidence, and it is not a sign that something has gone especially wrong for you specifically. Seasons like this tend to arrive precisely when both frequencies have been dimmed for long enough that life itself starts applying pressure toward restoration, clearing away whatever no longer serves the version of you that is trying to emerge. It rarely feels pleasant while it is happening. Looking back, most people eventually recognize it as the exact season everything else in their life pivoted toward something better. I think of a phrase worth carrying with you through whatever season you find yourself in right now. Nothing is wasted. Not the years of dimmed wonder, not the reflexes that closed your hand against good things, not even the return signal that keeps visiting under stress. Every piece of it has been raw material, and raw material, however uncomfortable to hold, is never the same thing as waste. If you are in a season that feels heavier than usual right now, let that heaviness be received as information rather than punishment. Something in you is being prepared, cleared, made ready for exactly the restoration we have spent this message describing. That preparation rarely announces itself clearly in the moment. It usually only becomes visible looking backward once the season itself has passed. Whatever season you are in, whatever specific ending brought you to this exact message today, I want you to know that none of it disqualifies you from everything we have covered. Quite the opposite. The very fact that you are here, listening this closely, this far into a message this long, tells me you are exactly the kind of person this entire architecture was built to reach. There is a final distinction worth making here between waiting and preparing. Waiting is passive, watching the clock, hoping something external changes on its own. Preparing is active, doing the small, deliberate practices we have walked through together, even before you can see any visible result yet. Every person whose story we have shared in this message was, at some point, preparing without yet being able to see the fruit of it. The fruit came later, sometimes much later, but it came only because the preparation happened first. I want to leave you with a simple truth to carry forward from this entire section. You are not behind schedule. There is no universal timeline you have failed to meet, no age by which this should have already happened for you, no comparison to anyone else's story that has any real bearing on your own particular unfolding. Your timing has been correct this entire time, even when it did not feel that way from the inside. I think of one final image before we move forward. A tree that spends years growing roots underground before a single visible inch appears above the soil. Anyone watching only the surface during those years would reasonably conclude nothing is happening at all, and yet everything necessary for what comes later is happening exactly then, in the part nobody can see. Whatever season you are currently in, however invisible any progress may feel right now, trust that the same principle applies to you. Roots are forming. Whether or not you can see them yet has very little bearing on whether they are actually there, doing exactly the quiet, essential work roots are meant to do before anything visible is ready to emerge. Carry that image with you as we move now into the closing part of this message, because it applies directly to everything still ahead. Some of what shifts in you today will be visible almost immediately. Some of it will take weeks or months to surface, quietly, the way roots always take longer than anyone watching from the outside expects them to. There is an old teaching, older than any of the traditions that later claimed it, that says, a person must become like a small child again before they can truly receive what was always meant for them. Most people hear that as a comforting metaphor and move on. Almost nobody hears it as an instruction with two separate steps in a fixed order, and that is exactly what it is. Step 1 is becoming the child again. Not literally young, awake in the way a child is awake, curious without needing a reason, open without calculating the risk first. Step 2 is receiving, actually letting something good land in your hands without your whole nervous system flinching and pushing it back out. You cannot skip to step 2. Nobody can. And that single detail explains almost every stalled comeback story you have ever quietly lived through. Think about every time you told yourself a chapter was closed and it was not. A relationship you swore you were over until a certain song or a certain street corner proved otherwise. A version of yourself you thought you had left behind until stress brought it right back to the surface like it had never left. Each of those was not proof that you are broken. Each of those was proof that only the first switch got flipped, while the second one stayed exactly where it always was. This is the shape underneath everything you are living right now, not one wound. 2. Stacked, sequence-dependent, and almost nobody has ever laid it out for you this plainly, because the people who could have are usually too busy selling you a single fix for what has always been a two-part problem. Here is the plain version of what this message is actually about, so there is no confusion later. That old chapter, the one you keep quietly checking on, did not end because time simply passed. It ended, or it is trying to end, because two frequencies inside you are being asked to turn back on in a specific order. And only when both of them are lit does an ending finally become permanent instead of temporary. Say that back to yourself slowly, not because you have to end anything from a place of trying harder, because you finally have to understand what actually happened, and once you understand it, effort stops being the thing that closes the door. Order does. Let me show you the first frequency in full, because until you see its entire shape, you will keep mistaking its symptoms for something else entirely, the way almost everyone around you already has for years. You read the same paragraph 3 times in a row, and none of it stays with you. Meanwhile, a song you loved when you were 9 years old still plays perfectly in your head. Every single word, decades later, without a single mistake. That gap is strange, and most people never stop to ask why it exists. They just call it getting older, or stress, or having too much on their plate. You have probably called it those exact things yourself: age, stress, too much on your screen. Maybe, quietly, in a moment you never said out loud, you called it something worse. That whatever you had as a child, you were simply never built to keep. None of that is what actually happened to you, and I want to say that plainly before we go any further, because carrying that particular belief around for years does real damage to a person, and you deserve to finally put it down. What actually happened has a shape, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it, and neither can I, and neither could I when I first understood it clearly enough to give it a name. There have always been figures scattered through history who seem to carry this exact awareness long before anyone had language for frequencies or switches. A shepherd boy who was overlooked by his own family, passed over by everyone in the room until someone finally saw what nobody else had bothered to look for. A woman at a well who was told the truth of her entire life in a handful of sentences and ran to tell the whole town, not because she was ashamed, but because she had finally been seen completely. a carpenter who spoke constantly about children, about becoming like them, about a kingdom that belonged to the ones who never lost their capacity to simply receive. None of these figures are being brought up as history lessons. They are being brought up because the pattern they lived is the same pattern living in you right now, whether or not you have ever put words to it. Overlooked, then seen, ashamed, then witnessed, grown up and hardened, then quietly called back towards something closer to a child. Here is the part almost nobody tells you, and I want to be careful and honest with you about it, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort right now. There are systems around us, in the way we are raised, the way school works, the way an entire economy runs, that benefit when a population forgets who they were as children. A person who has stopped questioning, stopped wondering, stopped believing in anything larger than the next task on their list is easier to manage, easier to keep small, easier to keep buying whatever keeps the discomfort quiet for one more day. That is not a conspiracy aimed at you individually. It is closer to a current, one that pulls in a certain direction by default, unless you notice it and swim the other way on purpose. I am not asking you to be afraid of anything. I am asking you to notice plainly that the child in you did not fade, because fading is what humans naturally do. Something dimmed it, deliberately or not, and once you see that clearly, you stop blaming yourself for a decline you never actually chose. Here is a pattern I have watched repeat itself in person after person, closely enough and often enough that I eventually had to give it a name of its own, because pointing at it vaguely was no longer enough for the people trying to understand what was happening inside them. I call it the decline effect, not because a laboratory somewhere coined that exact phrase for this exact experience. I call it that because it is precisely what it looks like from the inside, a bright and curious thing quietly dimming while every single person around you insists you are simply growing up. Around the age of 7, something begins to change in most children. The wonder that used to arrive automatically starts requiring more effort to access. School teaches structure, and structure is not the enemy, but somewhere inside that structure, a message gets absorbed without anyone meaning to send it. Curiosity is inefficient. Wonder does not show up on a test. Slow down. Stop asking so many questions. Get in line with everyone else. None of the adults doing this to you were cruel on purpose. Most of them had the exact same thing done to them at the exact same age, by people who loved them in their own limited way. This is not a story about villains. It is a story about a signal quietly turned down over years, generation after generation, until almost nobody remembers what it sounded like at full volume. There is real research behind why this particular frequency matters so much. Neuroscientists studying brainwave activity in children have long documented an abundance of a specific fast wave pattern, one linked directly to heightened learning capacity, creative insight, and a kind of open, unguarded perception that gradually narrows as a person ages into adulthood. Decades of work in this area, carried out across multiple research institutions, describe the same basic shape again and again. A child mind runs differently than an adult mind, and the difference is measurable, not imagined. I am not telling you this to make you feel like something was stolen from you, though in a very real sense, something was. I am telling you this so that the next part of this message lands the way it is supposed to land, with recognition instead of shame. I want to pause here for a moment and be honest with you, because honesty matters more to me than sounding impressive. I cannot tell you the exact day your particular decline began, and anyone who claims they can tell you that with certainty is not being straight with you. What I can tell you is the pattern, because I have watched it in enough people, closely enough, for long enough, to trust the shape of it even when the exact timing differs from person to person. The pattern is this. A child arrives with the volume turned all the way up. Curiosity, wonder, an almost embarrassing willingness to believe in things adults have long since stopped believing in. And then, gradually, through school, through comparison, through 1,000 small corrections delivered by well-meaning adults, the volume gets turned down, notch by notch, until most people reach adulthood, having forgotten there was ever a dial there to begin with. You were not built to lose that. You were built to keep it, and simply add wisdom on top of it as you aged, not replace it with something colder and more efficient. The fact that almost everyone around you lost theirs does not mean losing it was natural. It means almost everyone around you went through the exact same quiet erosion you did, and nobody ever compared notes long enough to notice the pattern repeating in every single person in the room. This is where I want to plant something in you before we go any further, because it changes how the rest of this message lands. What if the part of you that keeps circling back to old chapters, checking if they are really finished, is not a flaw at all? What if it is the exact same instinct that once let you notice everything, feel everything, wonder about everything, simply pointed now at the one question that matters most to you? Is it really over? That instinct is not broken. It has just been starving for years, running on a frequency turned down so low that most of your life happens on autopilot instead of on purpose. And the very fact that you are still here, still listening, still asking the question underneath the question, tells me that frequency is not gone. It is only quiet. I want to pause and be honest with you about something, because trust matters more in a message like this than sounding certain about everything. I am not a doctor, and nothing in this message is medical advice. What I am is someone who has spent a long time studying this exact pattern in research, in scripture, and in the actual lives of people who have shared their stories with me closely enough and often enough to trust the shape of what I am describing, even while specific details always vary from person to person. I say that because honesty has to come before anything else in a message like this one. If something here does not match your own experience, that does not mean the message is wrong. It may simply mean this particular message was not written primarily for you, and that is completely fine. Not everything is for everyone, and pretending otherwise would be its own kind of dishonesty. There is a breathing practice worth learning here, simple enough to use anywhere, that helps regulate the exact nervous system state we have been discussing. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold gently for a count of 4. Release slowly through your mouth for a count of 6, longer than the inhale. Repeat this 4 times. This pattern, sometimes called box breathing with an extended exhale, directly signals your nervous system to shift out of alert mode and toward a calmer, more receptive state. Try it right now. If you are somewhere, it is safe to close your eyes briefly. In, 4. Hold, 4. Out, 6. Notice, honestly, whether anything shifted, even slightly, in your shoulders or your jaw, or the pace of your own thoughts. I think of a young man in his 20s who described himself as someone who had never once, in his entire life, felt like he belonged anywhere fully. Not in his family, where he always felt like the odd one out. Not in his friend groups, where he performed a version of himself he did not quite recognize. He carried a persistent sense that he was waiting for something, though he could never explain to anyone, including himself, what exactly he was waiting for. He described the moment everything shifted for him, not as one dramatic event, but as a slow accumulation of small recognitions, each one small on its own, each one meaningless in isolation, until together they added up to something he could finally name. He was not broken. He was simply early, ahead of a season that had not yet fully arrived for him, carrying an awareness most people around him had not yet developed themselves. That story matters here because it illustrates something important about the entire architecture of this message. Transformation rarely looks like a single lightning strike moment, however much we might wish it did. It looks, far more often, like a slow accumulation, small shift after small shift, until one day you look back and realize you have become someone different than you were, without ever being able to point to the single exact moment it happened. There is a reason certain people find their way to a message exactly like this one, at exactly this point in their life, and it is worth naming plainly. It is rarely coincidence. More often, it is a kind of readiness arriving right before the content that speaks to it, as though something behind the scenes were pairing the right message with the right person at precisely the right moment. If that idea resonates with you, if you have noticed a pattern in your own life of finding exactly what you needed, exactly when you needed it, without ever fully understanding how, place the word timing beneath this message right now. There is an old distinction, worth understanding clearly, between two different kinds of confidence a person can carry. The first kind depends on circumstances lining up correctly, and it evaporates the instant something goes wrong. The second kind, deeper and far more durable, comes from a settled sense of identity, one that does not rise and fall with whatever is happening around you on any given day. Everything we have covered so far in this message is aimed at building the second kind, not the first. Not a temporary mood boost that fades by evening, but a durable shift in how you understand your own story, one that holds steady whether today happens to go well or goes badly. That distinction matters more than it might seem right now, because the first kind of confidence is exactly what most quick-fix approaches offer, and exactly why so many of them fade within weeks. I think of an older woman, well into her 70s, who told me once that the hardest part of her own healing was not learning a belief she had carried since childhood, that her worth depended entirely on how useful she was to other people. She had spent 5 decades earning love through service, exhausted long before exhaustion had a name she recognized. What shifted for her, in her own words, was not a single dramatic realization. It was a slow, repeated practice of receiving small kindnesses without immediately trying to earn them back through some act of service in return. A neighbor brought her soup once when she was sick, and instead of insisting on paying her back the very next day, she simply said, "Thank you," and let it be enough. She described that as one of the hardest things she had ever done. Harder, in her words, than raising 4 children or burying a spouse. Receiving, without earning cut, against 7 decades of conditioning in a single ordinary afternoon. And yet, she said, it was also the exact afternoon everything else in her healing finally started to move. Her story matters here because it shows something true across every single example in this message so far. The mechanism is always the same: restoration of wonder, opening of reception, in that order. And the surface details are always different. An engineer, a nurse, a teacher, a grandmother, each one meeting the exact same underlying architecture in the specific shape of their own particular life. I want to slow down here and make sure something lands clearly, because it is easy to hear all of this and still walk away thinking it is simply an interesting idea rather than something that actually applies to your specific life. So, let me ask you directly. When was the last time you tried something new purely because it seemed interesting? Not because it was useful, not because someone expected it of you, simply because curiosity pulled you toward it. If you had to think for more than a few seconds to answer that question, that gap itself is meaningful information. It does not mean anything is wrong with you. It means the first frequency we have been discussing has likely been running quieter than it once did, for exactly the reasons we have already walked through together. Here is a second question. just as direct. When was the last time someone offered you something, help, a compliment, an opportunity, and you simply accepted it, fully, without minimizing it, without immediately trying to balance the scale by giving something back right away? Sit with both of those questions honestly for a moment, without rushing to defend yourself or explain away the gaps. Most people, when they answer honestly, find at least one of these two frequencies running noticeably quieter than the other, and often both running quieter than they realize until a moment like this one asks the question directly. I want to tell you about a pattern I have noticed across hundreds of conversations with people walking through exactly this kind of restoration. The people who make the fastest, most durable progress are rarely the ones who intellectually understand the mechanism best. They are the ones willing to actually practice the small, almost embarrassingly simple exercises we have been walking through together. The breath, the pause, the noticing, the single word yes, spoken instead of an automatic no. Understanding without practice tends to produce interesting dinner party conversation and very little actual change. Practice without understanding tends to produce confusion about why anything is happening at all. Together, understanding and practice is where genuine, lasting restoration actually lives. And that combination is exactly what this entire message has been trying to hand you from its very first sentence. There is an old warning worth heeding here about the danger of knowing something intellectually while never actually living it. A person can memorize every teaching about receiving generously and still flinch every single time something good is actually offered to them. Knowledge and embodiment are not the same thing, and mistaking one for the other is one of the most common ways people stall out on this particular path. This is precisely why everything in this message has included something to actually do, not only something to understand. The breath count, the open hand, the single word, yes. The naming of an old pattern, out loud. None of these are decorative additions to the teaching. They are the actual mechanism through which teaching becomes transformation, rather than simply becoming one more interesting idea filed away and rarely revisited. I think about the specific phrase we keep returning to throughout this message: become like a child. It is worth noticing that children do not become children through understanding the concept of childhood. They simply are children, embodying curiosity and receptivity without ever having to think their way into it first. Adults, having lost that automatic embodiment, have to rebuild it deliberately, through practice, the same way a person recovering the use of a limb after injury has to rebuild strength through repeated, deliberate movement, rather than through understanding anatomy alone. That comparison matters because it removes shame from the process. Nobody expects someone recovering from an injury to simply think their way back to full strength instantly. Recovery takes repetition, patience, small increments of progress that often feel painfully slow in the moment and only become visible, looking backward, over weeks or months. The exact same patience applies here to a different kind of recovery, working through a different kind of injury, but following essentially the same honest, unglamorous process. If you have felt frustrated with how slowly any of this seems to be moving for you personally, I want to say plainly that the frustration itself is not evidence you are doing something wrong. It is simply evidence that you are in the middle of a real process, one that, like nearly every genuine recovery, rarely moves as quickly as the person living through it would prefer. A neuroscientist named Dr. Robert Lake has spent 34 years studying exactly this frequency, working alongside researchers connected to MIT, Princeton, and Harvard, and several other leading research universities. His work does not claim to have invented this pattern. It describes something that was already there, the same way a map does not create a mountain. It simply shows you where it has been standing the whole time. What his decades of research describe, in plain terms, is this. Children run predominantly on a fast, high-frequency brainwave pattern linked to creativity, wide-open learning, and a kind of instinctive trust in the world that adults typically lose. As we age, especially once formal schooling and social conditioning take hold, that pattern quiets down and a slower, more guarded pattern takes its place. Useful for certain kinds of adult focus, costly for almost everything else that made childhood feel the way it felt. Now, let us bring this all the way home, into your own life, because a mechanism means very little until it explains something specific that actually happened to you. Those years when you tried and nothing seemed to land the way it should have, when doors stayed shut no matter how hard you pushed, when your best effort produced results that felt smaller than the effort itself. Those were not years of you failing. Those were years of you carrying a dimmed frequency and calling the dimming a character flaw. You were never the problem. The dimmer was, and once you say that sentence to yourself slowly enough to actually believe it, something in your shoulders drops that has been held tight for longer than you can easily remember. I think of a woman, a teacher, who spent almost 2 decades convinced her best ideas had simply dried up sometime in her 30s. She assumed it was age. She assumed it was the job wearing her down. What she was actually experiencing was a textbook description of this exact decline, playing out in real time, in someone who had no language for what was happening to her, until she finally heard it named out loud. The moment she heard the shape of it described accurately, she said the strangest sensation was not relief exactly. It was recognition, like being handed back a photograph of herself she did not know had been missing. Here is your return agency, right now, at no cost, requiring nothing beyond your attention for the next few seconds. The next time anything unexpectedly good crosses your path today, a compliment, an easy conversation, an idea that arrives without effort, do not immediately explain it away. Do not call it luck and move on. Pause for one breath and let yourself notice it landed. That noticing, small as it seems, is the first frequency waking back up in real time, and you just did it without buying anything or changing anything about your life. If you have made it this far, and something in what I just described matches your own experience closer than you expected, place the word decline beneath this message where you are listening right now, not for me. For the version of you that has been waiting years to hear this explained out loud, I want to be completely honest with you about something before we continue, because trust matters more to me than making this sound bigger than it is. What I am about to describe is a tool, not a requirement. Everything of real value in this message so far has cost you nothing and will continue to cost you nothing, whether or not you ever go looking for anything beyond this message. There is a 7-minute audio built directly around this exact frequency, developed by Dr. Lake using calibrated tones designed to gently invite that faster brainwave pattern back toward the surface. It is called the Genius Song, and the mechanism behind it is precisely the one we just walked through together, restoring a frequency that conditioning quieted down, not adding anything foreign to who you already are. It sits in the description beneath this message, alongside everything else we are going to talk about before this is finished. For now, simply hold what you have already learned, because we are only halfway through the first half of what this message actually came here to give you. Picture a morning some months from now, further down this same road. You open your eyes before the alarm sounds. Before a single worry has time to arrive, something in your chest already feels different, lighter, awake, in a way mornings have not felt in a very long time. You lie there a moment longer than usual. The familiar knot that normally sits just under your ribs is not there. The first thing that moves in you is not the low hum of dread about the day ahead. It is a small, simple question, the kind you stopped asking somewhere around the age of 8, curious instead of anxious, open instead of already bracing for disappointment. You get up differently on that morning, not because anything dramatic changed overnight, but because a frequency that had been turned down for years is finally running closer to where it was always meant to sit. Ideas arrive a little easier. Conversations feel a little lighter. A stranger says something kind, and for once, you actually let it land instead of brushing it off before it fully arrives. What separates you from that morning is not more effort, and it was never about trying harder than you already have. It is a frequency that was turned down in you a long time ago, quietly, without your permission, and has simply never once been turned back up until now. There is a simple practice worth carrying with you before we move any further, something you can use starting tonight that costs nothing and needs no device, no course, no subscription. Before you close your eyes tonight, name one small moment from today when you felt even slightly curious about something. Not grateful, curious. The difference matters because curiosity is the exact frequency we have been talking about this entire time, and naming it out loud or in your mind is a way of telling your own nervous system that this frequency is welcome again. Do this for a handful of nights in a row, and you will notice something shift, not because of magic, but because attention is the oldest activation tool there is. Older than any technology, older than any product, and entirely yours regardless of anything else in this message. Now, having said all of that plainly, I want to walk you toward the second half of what has been sitting underneath your particular chapter this whole time, because the first frequency alone, even fully restored, only ever tells half of the story. There is a second reason. Endings keep quietly reopening, and it has almost nothing to do with wonder or curiosity at all. It has to do with something far closer to your body and to money, and to every single time something good has arrived in your life and some part of you flinched. Think about the last time someone offered you something good, help carrying a heavy load, a genuine compliment, an unexpected opportunity, and notice honestly what happened in your body before your mind even had time to respond. For a great many people listening right now, the answer is some version of resistance, a polite no, a quiet deflection, a reflex to minimize whatever was just offered before it can fully land. That reflex has a name too, and it is not humility, whatever you have been calling it all these years. It is a signal, every bit as real and every bit as measurable as the one we just spent time understanding together. And it explains something that curiosity alone never could. Why good things arrive in your life and somehow still slip through your hands. There is a quieter sign worth naming here, one that often goes unnoticed until someone points directly at it. Certain numbers seem to follow you on clothings, on receipts, on license plates, passing by at exactly the right moment. Most people either dismiss this entirely as meaningless coincidence or swing to the opposite extreme and treat every repeated number as a direct message requiring urgent interpretation. Neither extreme serves you particularly well. Here is a more grounded way to hold this. Repeated numbers, when they happen to catch your attention, are worth treating as gentle invitations to pause and notice, rather than as coded instructions demanding immediate action. The value is in the pausing itself, the brief moment of attention it creates, not in decoding some elaborate hidden message from the universe about your next major life decision. I think of a man who began noticing the same sequence of numbers appearing with unusual frequency during the exact season he started this kind of inner work. Rather than treating it as a sign to make some dramatic change, he simply used each appearance as a cue to pause, breathe, and ask himself the same discernment question we practiced earlier: fear or truth? Over months, that simple habit, triggered by something as small as a glance at a clock, became one of his most consistent grounding practices. There is a teaching tool worth introducing here, something to help you tell the difference between a genuine inner nudge and simple anxiety wearing a spiritual costume. A genuine nudge tends to feel calm, even when it is asking something difficult of you. Anxiety tends to feel urgent, loud, and often attached to a very specific timeline that feels non-negotiable. When you are unsure which one you are hearing, ask yourself honestly, which of those two qualities is more present, calm clarity or urgent pressure? This distinction matters enormously for everything we have covered so far, because it protects you from a common trap. Some people, once they begin sensing something larger moving in their life, start interpreting every uncomfortable feeling as a sign of impending disaster, or every pleasant coincidence as proof of a specific instruction they must follow immediately. Neither interpretation tends to be accurate. Growth is usually quieter, slower, and far less dramatic than either extreme suggests. I want to be honest about something else here too. I cannot tell you with certainty what any specific coincidence in your own life means, and anyone who claims they can read your personal signs with total precision is overstepping in a way that deserves healthy skepticism. What I can offer is a pattern, tested across many lives, that tends to hold true even while the specific details always differ from person to person. Here is a short practice worth carrying with you starting tonight. At the end of each day, for the next week, write down or simply recall mentally one moment that felt like a gentle nudge rather than urgent anxiety. Do not act on it yet. Simply collect it, the way you might collect small stones on a walk, without needing to build anything with them right away. After a week, look back at what you collected and notice whether any pattern emerges on its own. There is an old figure worth remembering here, a boy in a story who kept hearing his name called in the night and mistook the voice 3 separate times for someone else entirely, before finally recognizing it for what it actually was. He was not foolish for missing it the first 2 times. Recognizing a genuine calling often takes several attempts before it becomes unmistakably clear, and that is completely normal, not a sign you are somehow less perceptive than you should be. If you have ever felt that exact confusion, sensing something calling you without being able to identify clearly what it actually was or who it was coming from, that confusion is not a failure on your part. It is simply the ordinary, well-documented first stage of recognizing something real, and it passes with patience, the same way it passed for that boy in the story, 3 calls in before he finally answered correctly. There is a final piece of this particular teaching worth adding before we move forward. Trust in your own perception grows the same way any skill grows, through repetition and gentle correction, not through demanding perfect accuracy on your very first attempt. Give yourself the same patience you would give a child learning to read, sounding out words slowly, getting some wrong, and gradually, steadily, becoming fluent. You are allowed to get this wrong sometimes. You are allowed to misread a coincidence or miss a genuine nudge entirely, without that meaning you are somehow disqualified from this entire path. Every person who has ever developed genuine discernment did so by practicing imperfectly for a long time before it became more reliable, and you are no exception to that ordinary human process. Here is a pattern I want you to sit with for a moment, because it explains a kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got last night. Someone offers to help you carry something, literally or otherwise, and you hear yourself say no before you have even finished deciding. A compliment arrives and you hand it right back, deflecting it the way you might deflect an insult. You have wanted more for yourself your entire life, and somewhere along the way, you have quietly refused 100 small arrivals of exactly that, without ever once noticing you were doing it. You have probably called that independence. Maybe you have called it humility, or simply not wanting to be a burden to anyone. It is neither of those things, and I want to be gentle but direct with you here. It is a reflex, and reflexes are installed in us, not chosen freely, usually by circumstances none of us picked for ourselves as children. There is an old distinction worth understanding here, one that shows up quietly in 1,000 different self-help ideas without most of them ever naming it clearly. There is a difference between a closed hand and an open one. A closed hand protects. It kept you safe once, in a season when protecting yourself mattered more than receiving anything. An open hand receives, and most people never consciously choose which one they are living with. They simply keep the hand that once kept them safe long after the danger that shaped it has passed. I think of a man, an engineer, who spent his whole adult life proud that he did not owe anyone anything. He refused gifts. He insisted on paying his own way, even when someone offered generously and sincerely. He turned down a business partnership once because some part of him decided he had not yet earned it. His income was steady, respectable even, but every larger opportunity seemed to pass just out of reach, again and again, in a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. After learning to notice this exact reflex in himself, something shifted, not overnight, but within 2 weeks. An old client reached out with a new project, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he said yes before he had time to invent a reason to decline. He described it afterward this way. It did not give him more courage. It simply released the reflex that had been closing his hand shut his entire adult life. Here is a piece of practical teaching worth carrying with you, regardless of anything else in this message. There is an old spiritual discipline called discernment, simply the practice of pausing before reacting, asking quietly whether a response is coming from fear or from truth. The next time you feel the urge to deflect something good, pause for exactly 1 breath before you speak. That single pause is often enough to let a different, more honest response arrive in its place. Close your eyes for just a moment, if it is safe for you to do so right now, and picture a closed hand resting in your lap. Notice how much effort it takes to hold a hand closed, tension you rarely notice because it has become the default. Now imagine, slowly, that hand opening, fingers relaxing one at a time, not reaching for anything, simply open. Notice what that stillness feels like in your chest. That is not a metaphor only. It is a rehearsal your nervous system is capable of running right now, for free, before anything else in this message continues. There is a woman I think of often, 45 years old, a nurse working long shifts in a hospital in the American Midwest. She began paying closer attention to this exact pattern in her own life, quietly, without telling anyone. And for the first 3 weeks, she noticed almost nothing different. Same worries, same mornings. She nearly gave up more than once, half convinced nothing about this was actually true for her specifically. She kept going anyway, mostly because the practice cost her nothing but attention, a few minutes here and there scattered through her day. By the 6th week, her daughter asked her, almost in passing, why she had started saying, "Yes, let me take that," instead of her usual, "No, it is fine, I have got it." She had not noticed the shift happening in real time. It had happened quietly, underneath her own awareness, the way most real change tends to happen, without a single dramatic before and after moment to point to. There was no single breakthrough day for her, no lightning bolt, just a slow, steady loosening of a hand that had been closed for most of her adult life, one small arrival at a time, until one day she looked back and realized she had genuinely become someone who receives instead of someone who quietly refuses. If any part of her story sounds familiar, the closed hand, the reflex to refuse, the quiet exhaustion of always being the one who gives and rarely the one who receives. Place the word hand beneath this message. Let that be your own small rehearsal of receiving, right now, in public, in this tiny way. I want to acknowledge something honestly here, because a message like this one can sometimes feel like it is asking you to simply think positive thoughts and hope the rest sorts itself out. That has never been the intention, and if that is all this were, I would not have spent this much time on it. Thinking differently matters, but a reflex installed over decades rarely dissolves through willpower alone, and pretending otherwise does a disservice to how genuinely stubborn these patterns can be. This is also where I want to be honest about something else. I cannot tell you the exact week your particular pattern will loosen, and anyone who promises you a precise timeline is not being straight with you. What I can tell you with real confidence is the shape of the pattern itself, because I have watched it closely enough in enough different people to trust it, even when the timing varies from person to person. There is an old story about a kingdom hidden in plain sight, described as belonging specifically to those who become like children again. Long ago, someone taught that idea to a room full of adults who had spent their entire lives building status, protecting reputations, accumulating whatever they believed proved their worth. Almost none of them understood, in that moment, that the teacher was describing something closer to a frequency than a metaphor. Fewer still understood he was also describing an order. Become the child first, only then receive. That order is not incidental. It is the entire hinge this whole message turns on. You cannot open your hand to receive fully while the child in you is still dimmed, because a dimmed child mind does not yet have the capacity to trust what is being offered, and you cannot simply add more effort to a dimmed frequency and expect an open hand to appear on its own. Sequence matters more than intensity, in this and in almost everything worth doing well. Hold both of these together for a moment. The frequency of wonder, quieted since childhood. The frequency of receiving, closed by a lifetime of guarding yourself against disappointment. Two different mechanisms, two different symptoms, and as we are about to see, two very different solutions, arriving in a very specific and very necessary order. There is a practice worth learning properly, not as decoration, but as a tool you can actually use, something teachers of inner life have pointed to for as long as there have been teachers at all. It is called discernment, simply the practice of pausing before reacting, asking quietly whether a response rising in you is coming from old fear or from present truth. Most people react on autopilot, running the same script their nervous system has run for decades. Discernment interrupts that autopilot gently, without force, one pause at a time. Here is how to actually use it, starting today, at no cost. The next time you feel a strong reaction rising, before you speak or act, ask yourself one simple question. Is this fear talking, or is this truth talking? You do not need a perfect answer. The asking itself is the practice. Over time, that single pause, repeated enough times, begins to change which voice you default to responding from. I think of a man in his 50s, a father of 3, who spent years reacting to his teenage daughter with a sharpness he did not recognize in himself, an old pattern inherited almost exactly from his own father before him. He began asking that single question, quietly, before responding to her, fear or truth. Within a matter of weeks, without any dramatic confrontation or breakthrough conversation, their relationship simply felt different, softer, less like two people bracing for impact. There is a second tool worth carrying with you, something teachers of inner life have called setting a sacred boundary. Not a wall built to keep people out permanently, but a clear line that protects the quiet space a person needs in order to actually hear their own inner voice, instead of the noise everyone else keeps generating. Most people who feel constantly depleted are not actually lacking energy. They are lacking boundaries, and the depletion is simply the visible symptom of an invisible cause. Here is a practical version of this you can use today. Choose one small area of your life, an evening, a room, a single hour, and protect it deliberately as time that belongs only to your own thinking, your own quiet, your own attention. Tell the people around you plainly, without apology, that this time is protected. Watch what happens to your energy over the following 2 weeks. A third tool, older than either of the first two, is the practice of forgiveness, properly understood, not as excusing what happened, but as releasing the charge that keeps replaying it in your body long after the actual event has ended. Forgiveness was never primarily a gift for the other person. It was always, first and foremost, a release valve for the one still carrying the weight. I want to walk you through a short version of this practice right now, briefly, because it connects directly to everything we have already covered. Bring to mind, gently, not the most painful thing you have ever experienced, but something smaller, something manageable for this moment. Picture the situation clearly for a few seconds. Then say quietly, either out loud or in your own mind, "I release the charge this is holding in my body. I keep the lesson. I release the weight." Notice what happens in your chest as you say that. For many people, something loosens, even slightly, even if the full release takes repeating this practice many times over many days, rather than once. That is normal, and it does not mean the practice failed. Real release is rarely instant. It is usually cumulative, one small loosening at a time. There is an old idea worth sitting with here, the notion of a sacred environment, a physical and emotional space deliberately protected so that a calling, a purpose, a quiet inner voice has room to actually be heard rather than drowned out by constant noise. Most people never deliberately build this. They simply live inside whatever environment life handed them, noisy, reactive, constantly interrupted, and then wonder why their own inner voice feels so faint and hard to trust. Building a sacred environment does not require moving somewhere remote or dramatically restructuring your life. It can be as simple as one corner of one room, kept slightly more quiet than the rest of your home, used consistently for exactly the kind of reflection we have been doing together throughout this message. Consistency matters more than scale. A small space returned to daily outperforms a large space visited once a year. I think of a woman who transformed a single unused closet into what she called her quiet corner, nothing more than a chair, a small lamp, and 5 minutes each morning before anyone else in her house woke up. She described that 5 minutes as the single most stabilizing part of her entire day, more grounding than anything else in her schedule, despite occupying the smallest slice of her time. There is also a season worth naming honestly, something teachers of inner life have long called a season of elevation, a period when old structures in a person's life begin shifting all at once, seemingly unrelated changes clustering together in a way that feels less like coincidence and more like a current moving underneath the surface of ordinary life. You may have noticed this yourself recently, a relationship ending around the same time as a job change, a sudden urge to declutter your physical space right as your thinking begins to feel clearer. These clusters are not random. They tend to arrive together because a single underlying shift, often the exact kind of frequency restoration we have been discussing, tends to ripple outward into every area of a life at roughly the same time. There are 3 areas worth watching closely during a season like this. Your relationships, which often reorganize themselves as some connections deepen and others quietly fade. Your energy, which often reorganizes as certain activities that used to drain you no longer do, and others that used to energize you suddenly do not. And your relationship with time itself, which often shifts as urgency about certain things fades, while urgency about entirely different things rises in its place. If you have noticed any of these three reorganizing in your own life recently, that is not a sign something is going wrong. It is very often a sign something correct is finally underway, even when the process itself feels disorienting while it is happening. I want to name something plainly here, because plain naming is often the most useful thing this kind of message can offer. There are counterfeit versions of everything we have been describing, paths that look similar on the surface, but lead somewhere different entirely. A counterfeit awakening chases constant new information without ever actually applying any of it, mistaking learning for transformation. A counterfeit healing performs peace outwardly, while the same old reactions keep firing underneath, unaddressed, merely hidden better than before. The way to tell the difference is not complicated, even though it requires honesty most people would rather avoid. Ask yourself, quietly, whether what you are doing is actually changing how you respond in real moments, under real pressure, or whether it is simply giving you new language to describe the exact same old patterns. Real restoration shows up in ordinary Tuesday afternoons, in how you respond to your child, your co-worker, your own inner critic. It rarely shows up primarily as a feeling of enlightenment during a quiet moment of reflection, though those moments matter too. There are recognizable identity patterns among people walking this particular path, patterns worth naming so you can recognize them in yourself with more clarity. Some of you are what I would call the seer, someone who notices patterns before others do, who feels things in a room before anyone says a word out loud. Some of you are the cycle breaker, the first in your family line to actually interrupt a pattern that repeated for generations before you arrived. Some of you are the wounded healer, someone whose own deepest pain became, over time, the exact source of your capacity to help others through similar pain. None of these are labels meant to flatter you or box you in. They are simply recognizable shapes, patterns that repeat across many different lives. And recognizing your own shape among them tends to reduce the loneliness that so often accompanies this particular journey. You are not the only person who has ever walked this exact path, even when it feels, late at night, like you are entirely alone in it. Here is something practical to carry forward from everything we have covered so far in this message. Tonight, before sleep, take 30 seconds to simply name, honestly, which of these identity patterns feels closest to true for you right now. Not to decide it permanently, only to notice it, the same way we practiced noticing curiosity earlier. Naming a pattern accurately is often the very first step toward consciously choosing how you want to live inside of it. There is a question worth asking honestly, and I want you to actually sit with it instead of rushing past it. Why does an old chapter, one you were certain was finished, sometimes come roaring back the moment life gets stressful, as if it had never left at all? A comment from a relative, a hard week at work, one late night scrolling through old messages, and suddenly you are right back in the exact same emotional room you thought you had permanently exited. Most people explain this away as weakness, as if getting triggered proves the healing was never real to begin with. I want to offer you a different explanation, one that has nothing to do with how strong or weak you are, and everything to do with a signal almost nobody has ever taught you to recognize until this exact moment. You have probably called this backsliding. Maybe you have called it proof that you are simply the kind of person things like this happen to, over and over, on a loop, with no real exit. Neither of those is accurate, and both of them keep you stuck in exactly the shame that makes the whole cycle worse. Here is what is actually happening underneath the surface. When stress rises, your body shifts into a faster, more alert state, useful for actual danger, deeply unhelpful for almost everything else. In that state, the nervous system reaches for whatever pattern is most familiar, not whatever pattern is most healed, because familiar reads as safe to a body under pressure, even when familiar is exactly the pain you were trying to leave behind. I call this the return signal, not because it was named that in a textbook somewhere, but because that is precisely what it feels like from the inside. An old chapter reaching back through the exact same doorway stress just cracked open. It is not proof the ending never happened. It is proof that one of the two frequencies we have been discussing is still running low, and stress will always find whichever door is weakest. This is actually good news, even though it rarely feels that way in the moment. It means the return is not random, and it is not a life sentence. It follows a pattern, and a pattern can be learned, which means it can also be interrupted deliberately, on purpose, the moment you know what to look for. Here is the honest way to tell whether an ending has actually held versus whether only the loud, visible part of it stopped, while a quieter part kept running underneath. Ask yourself this: when something stressful happens now, does the old story come back exactly the same, full volume, full grip? Or does it visit briefly and pass through, noticed, but no longer in control of you? That difference is the entire test, and almost nobody has ever explained it to you this plainly before today. I think of a man who spent 3 years certain he had fully forgiven someone who deeply hurt him. He had done the work. He had said the words out loud, to himself and to others. And then, one ordinary Tuesday, a single unrelated comment sent him right back into that same old anger, as sharp as the very first day it happened. He assumed this meant the forgiveness had been fake all along. What was actually happening was simpler and far less damning than that. The visible chapter, the relationship itself, had genuinely ended, but the quieter mechanism underneath, the one that controls how his body responds under pressure, had never actually been addressed. One door had closed. The second one was still wide open, waiting for the right kind of stress to walk right back through it. Here is something you can do today, at no cost, that begins interrupting this exact pattern. The next time an old story tries to resurface under stress, do not fight it, and do not pretend it is not happening. Simply name it out loud, quietly, to yourself. There it is again. That naming alone shifts the response from your body, reacting on autopilot, to your mind, observing on purpose. And observation is the very first step of any interruption. If any part of this return signal sounds like something you have lived through more than once, place the word return beneath this message. Naming it here, even privately, is one more small act of the same interruption we just walked through together. There is a fair question you might be asking right now, quietly, and I want to answer it directly instead of dancing around it. If all of this can be understood through attention and awareness alone, why would anyone need a tool at all? It is a completely reasonable question, and here is the honest answer. Understanding a mechanism and shifting a nervous system that has run a certain way for 30 or 40 years are two very different tasks, even though understanding is always the necessary first step. Awareness tells you where the door is. It does not automatically walk you through it. That is not a flaw in you, and it is not evidence that you are trying wrong. It is simply the honest difference between knowing something in your mind and having your body actually catch up to what your mind now understands. Some of you listening right now are naturally skeptical of anything framed this way, and I want to say plainly that skepticism has served you well in your life. It has kept you from being taken advantage of more times than you probably realize. Nothing in this message is asking you to abandon that instinct. It is only asking you to notice whether what has been described so far actually matches something true in your own experience, independent of whether you ever act on anything beyond this message. Here is a second small practice, free, available to you, starting the next time stress rises in your day. When an old pattern tries to return, place one hand flat against your chest and take one slow breath before responding to whatever triggered it. That single pause interrupts the automatic loop just long enough for a different response to become available, never certain, only available, which is often exactly the margin a nervous system needs. Do this consistently, and you will likely notice the old pattern still visits sometimes, because interruption is not the same as erasure. What changes is the grip it has on you and how quickly you are able to return to yourself once it passes through. That shift alone, over weeks, quietly changes the entire texture of what an ending actually means in your life. There is a symbolic practice worth learning here, something you can do with your body, not only your mind, because the body often needs its own version of the lesson before it fully believes what the mind has already understood. Stand, if you are able to right now, or simply picture standing if you are not. Let your hands hang loosely at your sides, then slowly curl them into fists, tight, the way a hand naturally curls when it is bracing for impact. Hold that tightness for a slow count of 5, noticing exactly how much effort tension actually requires. Effort you likely carry unconsciously most of your day without ever noticing the cost of it. Now, slowly, deliberately, uncurl your fingers one at a time, if that helps, until your hands rest open, palms facing gently upward. Notice the difference. Notice how much less effort openness actually requires once you stop bracing against something that is not actually there anymore. That small physical practice is not decoration. It is a rehearsal, teaching your nervous system through the body rather than only through ideas what receiving actually feels like, in contrast to guarding. Practiced regularly, even for a minute at a time, it becomes a physical anchor you can return to whenever the return signal we described earlier starts to visit. I think of a woman who used this exact practice every single time she noticed old anxiety rising during a difficult season at work. Fists held briefly, then released, slowly, deliberately, several times a day. She described it, months later, as the single most practical tool she had ever been given, more useful in the actual moment of stress than any amount of journaling after the fact. Here is something worth understanding about why old patterns return under stress, even after real healing has genuinely occurred. Your nervous system does not delete old patterns the way a computer deletes a file. It builds new pathways alongside the old ones, and under enough pressure, the nervous system will often default back to whichever pathway is oldest and most well-worn, not because the new pathway failed, but because old grooves are simply easier to fall back into under duress. This is precisely why the return signal we discussed earlier is not proof that nothing changed. It is proof that the new pathway is still younger than the old one, and young pathways need more repetition, more practice, more gentle reinforcement before they become the automatic default rather than the deliberate choice. There is real comfort available in that reframe if you let it land. You are not failing every time an old pattern briefly resurfaces. You are simply still early in building a newer, less worn path. And every single time you notice the old pattern and consciously choose differently, even if only for one breath, you are reinforcing exactly the pathway this entire message has been describing. I think of the phrase again and again, 70 times 7, an old teaching about the sheer volume of forgiveness required, not because forgiveness is meant to be endless suffering, but because it was never meant to be a single event. It was always meant to be a practice, repeated, patient, forgiving the same old pattern as many times as it takes to finally loosen its grip completely. If you have been quietly frustrated with yourself for needing to practice something more than once, for the old story returning even after you thought you had already moved past it, I want you to hear this clearly. That frustration is aimed at the wrong target. The practice needing repetition is not evidence you are doing it wrong. It is simply how every single nervous system on Earth actually learns anything durable at all. There is a story I think of often about a woman raising 3 children largely on her own after her husband passed unexpectedly. For nearly 2 years, every small setback, a broken appliance, an unexpected bill, a difficult day at her children's school sent her spiraling into the exact same panic, as though disaster itself had permanently moved into her home and never left. She began practicing exactly what we just walked through together, noticing the old panic rising, naming it quietly, there it is again, and then consciously choosing one small physical action, opening her hands, taking one slow breath before responding to whatever had triggered it. The panic did not disappear overnight. It grew, slowly, steadily quieter, month after month, until eventually a broken appliance was simply a broken appliance again, an inconvenience rather than an emergency. She told me the turning point, looking back, was not any single day. It was the accumulation of small moments where she chose to respond differently, dozens of them, then hundreds, until the new response finally became more automatic than the old panic had ever been. Here is something else worth carrying forward from her story specifically. She never once needed the old panic to disappear completely before her life started genuinely improving. She simply needed it to visit less often and leave more quickly when it did visit. That is not a consolation prize. That is what real, lasting change actually looks like for almost everyone who has ever walked through it honestly. There is an old Hebrew word worth sitting with for a moment, shalom. Most people translate it simply as peace, and that translation is not wrong, but it is incomplete. Shalom carries a deeper meaning, something closer to wholeness, nothing missing, nothing broken, every piece present and in its right place. It was never a word about the absence of conflict. It was a word about completeness itself. That distinction matters enormously for what we have been walking through together. You have likely experienced peace before, a calm afternoon, a good conversation, a quiet morning. But peace without wholeness fades the moment stress returns, because peace alone was never designed to hold under pressure. Wholeness is different. Wholeness is what remains standing after the storm passes, because nothing essential was ever actually missing to begin with. I want to tell you about someone whose story I have carried with me for a long time. Details changed to protect her privacy, but the shape of it entirely true. She had done everything right by every external measure. Steady income, a caring family, a home she had worked hard for. And yet she described her life as feeling perpetually like a room with one lamp missing, everything visible, nothing quite illuminated the way it should have been. She had tried therapy, and it helped, genuinely. She had tried a season of intentional gratitude practice, and it helped too, for a while. Neither one, on its own, ever fully closed the gap she felt. It was only when she began to understand that she was carrying 2 separate, distinct deficiencies, not one blended feeling of not enough, that something in her finally clicked into place. She was not vaguely unwell. She was specifically missing 2 things, and once she could name them separately, she could finally address each one on its own terms. Here is a rest point, a moment to simply breathe before we go further, because what comes next carries real weight and deserves your full presence rather than a distracted half attention. Take one slow breath in and a slower one out. Notice, without judgment, everything we have covered so far. The dimmed frequency of wonder, the reflex to refuse good things, the return signal that visits under stress. All three point toward the same underlying architecture, and in a few minutes, that architecture is going to become completely clear. I also want to acknowledge something honestly here. I cannot promise you a specific date when your own particular chapter will feel fully, permanently closed. Nobody who tells you a precise timeline for something this personal is being straight with you, and I refuse to insult you with a promise like that. What I can offer you, with genuine confidence, is the pattern itself, verified across enough people that I trust its shape, even while the exact timing always differs from person to person. With that honestly said, let us turn now to the second frequency, the one hiding underneath every reflex to refuse, every good thing that has slipped through your hands, every quiet moment where receiving felt somehow more uncomfortable than struggling ever did. I know some of you listening have tried more than one approach before finding this message, and some part of you is bracing right now, waiting for the moment this turns into another promise that did not hold last time. That instinct is not cynicism. It is experience, hard-earned, and it deserves to be respected rather than argued with. Here is what I want you to notice, honestly. Every previous approach you tried very likely addressed one frequency and not the other. A gratitude practice touches wonder, but rarely touches the reflex to receive. A boundary-setting course touches receiving, but rarely touches the dimmed curiosity underneath it. Neither approach failed you because it was wrong. Each one simply addressed half of a problem that was always two halves. And half measures against a two-part problem will always feel like almost enough and never quite whole. That is not a reason to give up. It is the exact reason to finally understand what you are actually dealing with clearly, in full, before trying anything else at all. There is a second scientist whose research matters enormously here, a man named Dr. Stephen Newton, a former Stanford neuroscientist who eventually broke away from more conventional academic path. Important to keep sitting quietly in a university archive. His work focuses on a different brainwave pattern entirely, one connected not to curiosity, but to the nervous system state most adults live in almost permanently without ever noticing it. That state is called beta, a faster, more vigilant brainwave pattern associated with alertness, calculation, and constant low-grade scanning for threat. Useful in short bursts. Deeply costly when it runs almost continuously, which is precisely what modern life, financial pressure, constant notifications, and an economy built on urgency tends to produce in nearly everyone. When beta runs high for long enough, it crowds out a slower, calmer pattern called alpha, the exact state most closely associated with genuine receptivity, the neurological equivalent of an open hand rather than a closed one. Research connected to institutions, including Stanford and Boston University, along with other research institutions, has spent years documenting exactly how this crowding out occurs and how directly it correlates with the felt sense many adults describe of trying and trying without ever quite receiving what they were reaching for. I call this the stress signal. Not because a laboratory somewhere handed me the exact phrase, but because that is precisely what it feels like from the inside, wanting more, your entire life, while some part of your own nervous system quietly runs interference against the very thing you say you want most. Here is something worth understanding about why this second frequency, the one governing reception, tends to be even harder for most people to notice than the first. A dimmed sense of wonder is at least uncomfortable in an obvious way. A flatness, a boredom, something you can feel missing. A closed reception channel often hides behind something that looks, from the outside, like a virtue: independence, humility, not wanting to be a burden. It disguises itself so well that most people spend their entire lives never once suspecting it is actually a wound rather than a strength. I think of a phrase worth sitting with slowly. Blessed are those who know their need. That teaching has always struck people as somewhat backwards, praising need rather than self-sufficiency, until you understand what it is actually pointing toward. Self-sufficiency, taken to its extreme, becomes its own kind of prison, a closed hand mistaking its own tightness for strength. There is a woman worth mentioning here, someone who spent her entire adult life as the strong one in her family, the person everyone else leaned on, the one who never once asked for help, even during her own hardest seasons. When she finally allowed herself to receive support during a health crisis, she described the experience, unexpectedly, as one of the most spiritually significant moments of her entire life, more significant, in her words, than years of quiet, private prayer had ever felt. She said something I have carried with me since. Giving had always felt like love to her. Receiving, she realized in that moment, was also love, simply flowing in the other direction, and she had spent decades only ever letting love move one way through her. That reversal matters enormously for understanding what a fully restored life actually looks like. It is not a life where you only give generously, admirable as that sounds. It is a life where love moves freely in both directions, given and received, without either direction, feeling more virtuous or more comfortable than the other. Here is a practical exercise worth trying this week. Identify one person in your life you trust completely and deliberately ask them for a small piece of help with something you would normally handle entirely on your own. Not a large request. Something small enough to feel slightly uncomfortable without feeling overwhelming. Notice, honestly, what comes up in you as you ask, and notice again what comes up in you after they say yes. Most people report the same surprising discovery after trying this. The discomfort was almost entirely anticipatory, concentrated in the moments before asking, and largely dissolved the instant the other person actually responded with warmth rather than judgment. That gap between anticipated discomfort and actual experience tells you something important about how much of this pattern lives in old expectation rather than present reality. If any part of this resonates, the giving that came easily, the receiving that never quite did, place the word "give" beneath this message right now, as one small act of naming a pattern that has likely run quietly in the background of your life for a very long time. There is one more piece worth adding here, because it connects directly to the sequence this entire message has been building toward. Notice that the woman in the story we just walked through had already done significant inner work before that moment of receiving support arrived. She had already, in her own words, become more curious, more willing to sit with discomfort instead of immediately fixing it. The wonder had already been restoring itself, quietly, before the reception fully opened. That order was not incidental to her story. It rarely is. The capacity to genuinely receive tends to open more easily once a person has already begun reconnecting with the curiosity and openness of their earlier self, because a guarded, hardened adult mind, still fully closed off from wonder, tends to interpret every offer of help as either a threat or a debt, rarely as a simple gift. This is precisely why sequence matters so much throughout everything we have covered in this message. Not because one frequency is more important than the other, but because the door marked receiving tends to stay stuck exactly as long as the door marked wonder remains unopened just ahead of it. I want to share one more story with you now, different from the others, because it shows this same pattern playing out in a life that looks, From the outside, nothing like a spiritual journey at all. A man in his early 60s, recently retired after 4 decades running a small hardware store in a quiet town, found himself, within months of retiring, more anxious and more restless than he had ever been during his busiest working years. He could not understand it. He had worked toward this exact retirement for decades, and now that it had arrived, something in him felt worse rather than better. He described lying awake at night with a strange, unnamed grief, as though he were mourning something he could not identify, despite nothing obviously bad having happened to him at all. What eventually became clear, through slow reflection rather than any single dramatic realization, was that his entire adult identity had been built around being useful, needed, productive. Retirement had not simply removed a job. It had removed the one channel through which he had ever allowed himself to receive value, respect, purpose, all of it earned exclusively through output. Without the job, he had no practiced way of receiving those same things simply for existing. He began slowly, practicing exactly what we have described throughout this message, noticing small moments of curiosity again, a hobby he had abandoned decades earlier, a walk taken simply to notice the neighborhood rather than to get anywhere specific, and alongside that, practicing small moments of receiving, letting a neighbor thank him without immediately deflecting it, letting a compliment from his wife land instead of brushing it aside. 18 months into retirement, he described his life as unrecognizable compared to those first anxious months. Not because his circumstances had changed dramatically. He was still retired, still in the same small town, still without the job that had defined him for 40 years. What had changed was his relationship to receiving value from simply being, rather than only from producing. His story matters here because it shows this pattern is not limited to any single kind of person, any single background, any single set of circumstances. Teacher, engineer, nurse, single mother, retired store owner, different lives, entirely different surface details, and underneath every single one of them, the exact same 2 frequencies, dimmed in the exact same order, restored in the exact same sequence. Here is a simple framework worth carrying with you, something to check any practice or teaching against before investing real time in it, whether it comes from this message or anywhere else. Ask 3 questions. Does it explain something specific about your actual life rather than staying vague and general? Does it ask you to notice or do something concrete rather than simply feel something for a moment and move on? Does it hold up the second time you return to it rather than only working once out of novelty? Anything that answers yes to all 3 of those questions is worth taking seriously, regardless of where it came from. Anything that answers no to most of them is worth setting aside, however good it felt in the moment you first encountered it. This is not a test designed to make you suspicious of everything. It is simply a way of protecting the time and trust you have already invested by listening this far. I want to name, plainly, a counterfeit version of exactly what we have been building throughout this message, because naming it protects you better than simply hoping you avoid it by accident. A counterfeit restoration treats wonder as an aesthetic, buying crystals, changing your vocabulary, performing spirituality outwardly without ever actually loosening the underlying reflexes we have spent this entire message describing. It looks similar from a distance. It behaves completely differently up close, in the actual pressured moments of an ordinary day. The real version, the one this entire message has walked you through, shows up not primarily in how you decorate your life or what language you use to describe yourself, but in how you actually respond the next time something stressful happens or the next time something good is offered to you. That is always the test that matters most, more than any word you use to describe yourself to others. Let us bring this into your actual life now, because a mechanism only matters once it explains something specific you have lived through. Every time an opportunity arrived and some part of you found a reason, it was not quite right yet. Every time you worked hard enough to deserve rest and could not actually let yourself take it. Every time money moved toward you and somehow, within weeks, moved right back out again, as if your whole financial life were built on a floor that could not hold weight. None of that was carelessness, and none of it was some flaw unique to you. It was beta running high, quietly, in the background, treating every incoming good thing the exact same way it treats a threat. With vigilance, with resistance, with a reflex to keep you small enough to stay safe. Your nervous system was not betraying you. It was doing precisely what it was trained to do, protecting you from a danger that, in this particular case, was never actually there. There was never a moment, those years when nothing came to you at all. Things came, opportunities, kindnesses, openings. You were simply running a frequency that could not fully hold onto them once they arrived, the way water cannot stay in a hand held closed too tightly, no matter how much water keeps being poured toward it. I think of a woman, 45 years old, a nurse in the American Midwest, who used a very different practice built around this exact second frequency for 3 straight weeks and noticed almost nothing different. Same worries about money, same evenings replaying the same old anxieties. She had nearly decided the whole thing simply was not built for someone like her, and she almost stopped, more than once. She kept going anyway, mostly because it cost her only a few minutes a day, and she had nothing left to lose by continuing. By the 6th week, her daughter asked her, almost offhand, why she had started saying, "Yes, let me take that," instead of her usual, "No, I have got it, thank you." She had not noticed the shift happening in real time. It had happened underneath her own awareness, quietly, the way most real change actually happens, without a single cinematic before and after moment. There was no dramatic single day for her either, just a slow, steady loosening of a hand that had been closed for most of her adult life, one small arrival at a time, until she looked back one ordinary morning and realized she had genuinely become someone who receives instead of someone who quietly, reflexively refuses. If any part of her story matches your own, the closed hand, the reflex to deflect anything good, the sense that money and opportunity always seem to slip right back out the door it came in through, place the word channel beneath this message right now. Here is your return agency for this second frequency, free, available, the very next time anything is offered to you today. Help, a compliment, a seat, a small kindness from a stranger. Do not improve it. Do not deflect it or minimize it. Say one single word instead, yes. Then notice, honestly, where in your body some part of you tries to immediately undo that yes. That resistance you just located, right there in your own chest or your own shoulders, is the exact thing we have been describing this entire time. And you just met it directly, without spending a single dollar to do so. That old teaching about becoming like a child again was never only about wonder. A child does not just wonder freely. A child also receives freely a gift, a hug, a kind word, without first running an internal audit about whether it was earned. Somewhere between childhood and now, both of those capacities quieted down together in the same person at roughly the same time, which is precisely why they have to be restored in the same order they were lost. Picture something now, a scene rather than an idea. Something good is being offered to you, a number on a page, a door opening somewhere you did not expect, a name crossing your path that changes what is possible for you. And notice the strangest detail of this particular scene. Nothing in you moves to refuse it. Stay in that scene a moment longer. Your hands are open in your lap, not clenched. Your chest is not tight the way it usually gets the moment something significant is offered. There is a quiet where a protesting voice usually lives, the one that normally says, "This is too much," or "I have not earned this yet." That voice is simply not present in this particular scene, and its absence is the whole point. Now notice the gap between that version of you and the one sitting here right now, listening to this message. The distance between those two people was never effort. It was never about deserving it more than you already do. It is one channel, closed a long time ago, quietly, without your permission, that has simply never once been shown how to open. That morning moves one day further away. For every single day, that channel stays exactly where it currently sits. Before we go any further, I want to acknowledge something plainly, the way I have tried to throughout this entire message. Some part of you may still be quietly asking whether you are even worthy of what we have been describing, whether this kind of restoration is meant for people like you specifically, given everything you have been through, given choices you have made, given years that did not go the way you hoped they would. I want to say this as clearly as I can. Worthiness was never the gate here, and it never has been. A child does not have to earn wonder before feeling it, and a child does not have to prove themselves deserving before receiving a gift offered freely. If that standard applied to children, it was never going to apply fairly to you either, and holding yourself to it now is simply one more way the second frequency has been running quietly in the background of your life. I will also say honestly that I cannot promise you this restoration happens instantly or on any exact date, and I would rather tell you that plainly than promise you something I cannot actually deliver. What I can tell you with real confidence is that the pattern we have walked through together holds consistently across a great many people, even while the precise timing always looks a little different from one person to the next. There are physical signs worth naming honestly, because the body often knows things before the mind has caught up to naming them. A sudden shift in sleep patterns, waking at the exact same hour night after night for no obvious reason. A restlessness in the body that has nothing to do with physical tiredness. A sense of your own skin feeling almost too small for what is moving inside you. These are common, more common than most people realize, precisely during the season we have been describing throughout this message. None of these signs means something is wrong with you medically, and if anything here concerns you seriously, speaking with a physician is always the wise and appropriate step. What I am describing is a pattern reported again and again by people moving through exactly this kind of restoration, a body reorganizing itself in step with a mind and spirit, doing the same underlying work. I think of a man named in some tellings simply the veteran, someone who has genuinely tried more approaches than most people ever attempt in a lifetime. Therapy, medication when it was needed, journaling, meditation apps, men group circles, a silent retreat one particularly difficult winter. Each one helped, genuinely, and none of them, on their own, ever fully closed the exact gap he kept feeling underneath all of it. If that description matches your own experience, I want to say something directly to you, because you have earned directness more than false comfort. You are not someone who failed at healing. You are someone who has already done real work, addressing real pieces of a real puzzle, and what you have been missing is not more effort. It is very likely the second half of a two-part sequence that nothing you tried before ever fully addressed, because almost nothing you tried before was built around both frequencies together in the correct order. That is not an insult to any of the approaches that came before this message. Therapy genuinely helps process the past. Meditation genuinely helps quiet an overactive mind. Neither one, on its own, was ever specifically designed to restore both the frequency of wonder and the frequency of reception, together in sequence, which is precisely the gap this particular architecture was built to close. There is an old teaching worth returning to once more here, because it keeps proving itself relevant at every turn of this message. Long ago, someone taught a room full of grown adults that the kingdom belonged to those who could become like children again. Few in that room understood, in the moment, that he was describing something closer to a frequency than a simple metaphor. Fewer still understood that he was also describing a very specific order. Become the child first. Only then receive what was always meant to arrive. That teaching echoes here again, this time closer to the exact place it matters most, right at the point where a wakened child stands facing a channel that has not yet learned how to open. The becoming happens through one wave. The receiving depends entirely on the second. Neither one, alone, was ever meant to carry the whole weight by itself. I think of a story told about a father whose youngest son demanded his inheritance early, left home, spent it recklessly, and eventually found himself with nothing, feeding animals for a stranger just to survive. When he finally returned home, ashamed, expecting nothing more than a servant position, his father ran to meet him while he was still a long way off, before a single word of apology had even been spoken. That story is usually told as a lesson about forgiveness, and it is that genuinely. But look closer at what actually happens in it. The son had to physically turn around and walk home, an act of restoration, choosing to become, once again, someone capable of returning. But the story does not end with him simply arriving. It ends with him being received, embraced, celebrated, given a robe and a ring, welcomed fully back into everything that had always belonged to him. Restoration, and then reception. The exact same order, told 2,000 years before either researcher in this message was ever born. If any part of this story lands somewhere true for you, whether you have ever felt like that son, far from where you belong, or whether you have simply felt the ache of trying to come home to a version of yourself you have not seen in years, place the word home beneath this message right now. I want to tell you about another person, not in detail, simply enough to let the shape land. A woman spent years anxious about money, in a way that never quite matched her actual circumstances. Her income was stable, her bills were paid, and still, every month, a familiar dread arrived right before checking her account, as though disaster were always one step behind her, regardless of the actual numbers in front of her. She had already done what the veteran we described earlier had done: therapy, budgeting courses, affirmation practices repeated daily for months. Each one helped at the margins. None of them touched the specific reflex we have spent this message describing, the one that treats incoming good, including financial good, as something to brace against rather than something to simply hold. After beginning to work with both frequencies together, restoration and reception, in that order, she described something she had not expected. It was not a sudden windfall. It was instead the dread itself growing quieter, month by month, until checking her account no longer triggered the same automatic bracing it always had before. The numbers had not changed dramatically. Her relationship to them had. Let us bring everything together now, plainly, before we move into the final part of this message together, because you deserve a clear summary rather than scattered pieces left for you to assemble on your own. Two frequencies: wonder, dimmed since childhood by ordinary conditioning nobody deliberately designed to hurt you; reception, closed by a nervous system trained to treat incoming good as something to guard against rather than something to hold. Both frequencies restored in a fixed order: wonder first, then reception. Because a mind still running the decline effect cannot yet fully receive what reception alone would otherwise offer it. Every single example we have walked through together, the teacher, the engineer, the nurse, the young man who never felt he belonged, the grandmother who spent decades earning love through service, the retired store owner grieving a purpose he could not name, every one of them lived this exact same underlying architecture, wearing the specific clothing of their own particular life. And you, listening right now, are living some version of this same architecture too, whether or not you have ever had language for it before today. That is not a guess about you specifically. It is simply the pattern, tested across enough lives that I trust its shape, even while your own specific details will always look different from the story anyone else is living. I want to be honest one more time, because honesty deserves repeating rather than being said once and left behind. I cannot promise you a specific date your own particular chapter will feel fully, permanently closed. Nobody who promises you that with certainty is being straight with you. What I can promise you, with real confidence, is that the pattern holds, and that understanding it fully, as you now do, changes how you move forward from here in a way that simply was not available to you before this message began. There is a reason this particular pattern keeps surfacing across every tradition, every culture, every century, in slightly different language each time. Become like a child, then receive. Restoration, then reception. Wake the wonder, then open the hand. The details of the language shift. The underlying architecture never does, because it describes something true about how a human being, any human being, actually returns to wholeness after being dimmed by the ordinary weight of growing up in a complicated world. I think of the exact title that brought you to this message, the promise that something is over and that you will never have to go through it again. I want to honor that promise fully now, in its complete and honest form. What ends permanently, once both frequencies are restored in their correct order, is not difficulty itself. It is the particular, sticky quality that used to drag every hard season back into the exact same old wound over and over, no matter how many times you thought you had already closed the door. That stickiness is what actually ends, not life becoming easy, the old hook losing its grip permanently, so that whatever comes next in your life, hard or easy, meets you as someone whole, rather than someone still quietly checking whether the last chapter has finally, truly finished. Before we move into the final part of this message, I want to offer you one more moment of rest, because everything we have covered together carries real weight, and weight deserves a place to set down before we continue. Let your shoulders drop if they have not already. Let your breath slow, even slightly. There is nothing more to prove in this moment, and nothing more required of you right now except your continued presence. You have already done something meaningful simply by staying with this message this far. Many people never make it this deep into anything that asks real attention of them. The fact that you are still here, still listening, still willing to look honestly at these two frequencies in your own life already tells you something true about who you actually are, underneath every old story that ever told you otherwise. I want to add one more layer to everything we have covered so far, something that ties directly back to the very beginning of this message, because a message this long deserves to feel like one continuous thread rather than a collection of separate ideas loosely stitched together. Remember the 5 signs we walked through near the start of this message, the pull towards something larger, the strange tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep, the endings that kept finding you before you went looking for them, the discomfort with easy shortcuts, and the quiet, circling back to unfinished chapters. Every single one of those 5 signs traces back to exactly the 2 frequencies we have spent this entire message describing. The pull towards something larger is the first frequency, wonder, quietly asking to be let back in. The strange tiredness is the second frequency, reception, working overtime to guard against good things it has not yet learned it is safe to hold. The endings that kept finding you were life itself, again and again, trying to clear space for exactly this restoration, whether or not you ever understood what was actually happening at the time. The discomfort with shortcuts was your own inner wisdom, correctly sensing that a two-part problem cannot be solved by a one-part solution, however appealing that solution looked on the surface. And the quiet, circling back to unfinished chapters, the very thing that brought you to this exact message was never weakness. It was the most honest, most accurate part of you, refusing to accept a half ending as though it were a whole one. Every piece fits together now, the way pieces of a puzzle finally click into place after sitting scattered on a table for a very long time. Nothing about your story has been random. Nothing about the years you spent circling this same question has been wasted. Every piece was preparing you precisely for this exact message at this exact moment. I think of one more story worth sharing here, brief but worth including, about a woman in her 30s who described her entire adult life as feeling like she was constantly almost there, almost successful, almost at peace, almost ready to receive the life she quietly believed she deserved, without ever quite arriving at any of it fully. Almost, she said, had become the most exhausting word in her vocabulary. What she eventually understood, through exactly the process we have walked through together in this message, was that almost was not a character flaw or a lack of effort. It was the precise, accurate description of what happens when one frequency restores while the other stays closed. Curiosity returning, opportunities beginning to appear, and still, underneath all of it, a reflex that would not quite let the good fully land. Once she understood both frequencies needed restoring in order, almost stopped being her permanent condition. It became, instead, simply a stage she had passed the way to something more complete. The same stage many of the people in this message passed through before her, and the same stage you yourself may be standing in right at this very moment. If the word almost has described your own life more often than you would like to admit, place the word almost beneath this message right now. Let that single word be the last thing standing between you and finally naming out loud exactly what has been happening underneath your own story this entire time. Here is one final practical teaching before we move into the closing part of this message. Every night for the remainder of this week, ask yourself 2 questions before you sleep. First, where did curiosity show up today, however small? Second, where did I let something good actually land today without deflecting it? Answer both honestly, even when the honest answer is nowhere. Simply asking, night after night, trains your own attention to notice these 2 frequencies with increasing clarity over time. This single practice, repeated consistently, tends to matter more over a month than any single dramatic breakthrough moment ever could. Small, consistent attention outperforms occasional intensity almost every single time, in this and in nearly everything else worth building in a life. There is a final, honest note worth adding here before we continue. Some of you listening have tried so many approaches over so many years that you may feel a quiet exhaustion even at the idea of trying one more thing, however well explained. I understand that exhaustion, and I do not want to minimize it by promising this will feel effortless from the very first day. What I can say honestly is this: everything described in this message so far has cost you nothing and has already given you a clearer map of your own inner life than you likely had before you started listening. Whatever you decide to do next, that map does not disappear. It stays with you, usable, regardless of any other choice you make from here forward. Take a moment now, if you have not already, to notice which single practice from everything we have covered feels most alive to you right now. The breath, the open hand, the naming out loud, the nightly 2 questions. Choose one, not all of them at once. One practice, chosen deliberately, tends to outperform 5 practices, attempted half-heartedly and abandoned within a week. Whichever one you choose, let it be simple enough that you will actually do it tomorrow and the day after that. Small and sustained beats large and abandoned every single time. In this, as in nearly everything worth building over a lifetime rather than over a single motivated weekend. Let us do something together right now, just for a minute, before we go any further. This requires nothing except your attention. No device, nothing to purchase, nothing to prepare in advance. Sit as comfortably as you can wherever you are right now. Let your shoulders drop slightly, even if only a little. You do not need headphones for this. You do not need silence. You only need about 60 seconds of your actual attention. Picture a room. In that room, a child is standing near a window, and a door on the far wall is closed. That child has been waiting a long time, not impatiently, simply waiting. The way children wait when they trust someone is eventually coming for them. That child is you, at whatever age feels most true to you right now. And the closed door is the exact thing we have spent this entire message describing together. Here is the shift I want to offer you. You have spent a long time reaching for what is on the other side of that door, straining, working, trying every angle you could think of. I want you to notice something different now. You are not reaching for something outside of you that you have to earn or capture. You are being handed something that was always addressed to you personally. And you are being asked, maybe for the first time in a long time, to simply take it. Let that land for a moment. Not reaching, receiving. Notice where that distinction shows up in your body. For a great many people, it shows up as a slight release in the chest, or the hands unclenching without being told to, or a breath that goes slightly deeper than the one before it. Whatever you noticed, however small, that is real, and it happened without anything being sold to you. Place one hand over your chest right now if it feels natural to do so. Let your breath out slowly, longer than you breathed in. That is the entire exercise, and you just did it. Whatever shifted, even slightly, carry that with you as we bring the rest of this together. Here is something worth sitting with honestly, and I want to be completely direct about it because directness matters more to me right now than sounding polished. Understanding everything we just covered does not automatically make your life different tomorrow morning. You can see the mechanism clearly. You can name both frequencies precisely, and there is a real chance that tomorrow your chest still tightens the exact same way it tightened this morning. That gap is not a failure on your part, and it is not proof that any of this was untrue. The answer was never only in your understanding, even though understanding was always the necessary first door. Something else has to meet the understanding. Something that works with your body the way understanding alone works with your mind. Here is what you now know that you did not know at the start of this message. 2 frequencies went quiet in you, and they went quiet in an order. The first one dimmed the wonder in you, the curiosity, the willingness to be surprised by your own life. The second one closed the channel that receives, the part of you capable of actually holding on to good things once they arrive. And the second one cannot be genuinely restored while the first one is still sitting in the dark. Restoration comes first, reception comes after. Not because one matters more than the other, but because a mind still running the decline effect does not yet have the capacity to actually receive what reception would otherwise offer it. Try to fix the second frequency while the first one stays dim, and you will find yourself pouring water into a hand that has not yet learned to stay open. What all of this gives you, in plain and practical terms, is a way of understanding your own life that finally holds together instead of fragmenting into a dozen separate explanations. Not more effort, not more willpower. A correct order applied to two very specific, very real, very human frequencies. And the identity underneath all of it is simple to say, even though it took this entire message to earn the right to say it plainly. You are not broken, and you were never behind. You are someone who has been carrying two dimmed frequencies in a specific order, and understanding that order changes everything about how you move forward from here. There is a name for what happens when both frequencies are restored together in the right order, and I want to give you that name now, not as a slogan, but as something closer to a diagnosis you can finally carry with you. I call it child mind reversal, not a treatment for something wrong with you. A reversal of a decline that was never your fault to begin with, restoring exactly what conditioning quietly took, in exactly the order it was taken. And here, finally, is who all of this makes you. Not someone flawed who needed fixing, someone the world dimmed in a specific and identifiable order, and someone who now understands precisely how to reverse that order, deliberately, on purpose, starting today. That is the identity underneath everything we have walked through together. Chosen one, child of light, not a label, a conclusion, earned by everything you just sat through. The clarity you just received is real, and I do not want to take anything away from it. But clarity, on its own, has never once opened a channel by itself. Clarity tells you where the door is. It does not walk you through it. There is a bridge worth building here, honestly and without any pressure attached to it, because what I am about to describe is a tool, and like any tool, it is entirely optional, offered only to whoever this message genuinely belongs to. You do not need it to keep everything you have already received in this message. That was never conditional on anything beyond your own attention. Two researchers working independently, decades apart in some cases, each spent their careers studying one half of exactly what we have walked through together. Neither one set out to build a product. Each one simply kept discovering the same pattern in person after person until the pattern became too consistent to ignore. Two discoveries, one order, and now, finally, one way to work with both of them directly. The first piece grew directly out of the work Dr. Lake did on the decline effect we described earlier, the dimmed frequency of childhood wonder. He built a 7-minute audio, calibrated using binaural tones, designed to gently invite that faster brainwave pattern back toward the surface, not forcing anything foreign into you, simply inviting back what conditioning quieted down over years. It is called the Genius Song, and its entire mechanism is exactly the one we already walked through together, restoring the frequency, nothing more mysterious than that. 6 things happen across those 7 minutes, in sequence, each one building on the last. It opens gently, calibrated tones, easing the nervous system out of its usual guarded state. It moves into a phase designed to loosen the grip of habitual, adult-style thinking. It holds a sustained middle section, aimed directly at inviting that faster, more open frequency back into activity. It layers in a brief, guided moment, recalling exactly the kind of childhood memory we practiced earlier in this message. It closes with a gentle return, easing you back into your day without any jarring transition. And it is designed to be used daily in roughly 7 minutes, requiring nothing else from you but simply listening. I think of a woman, a teacher, whose story I mentioned earlier in this message, the one who spent nearly 2 decades convinced her best ideas had permanently dried up. After beginning to use this exact restoration audio consistently, she described noticing, within the first couple of weeks, that ideas for her classroom began arriving again the way they used to, unforced. Almost embarrassingly obvious in hindsight, the way good ideas often are once a frequency reopens. And when that first wave does what it was built to do, here is what almost no one is ever told. The child in you can be fully, genuinely awake, curious again, open again, and still find itself standing in front of a second door that has not yet moved at all. That is not a flaw in the restoration. It is simply the honest, complete shape of what we have been describing this entire message. Awake is not the same as able to receive. A child who has just opened their eyes is not yet the same as a child whose hands are open. Both matter. Only one of them has been addressed so far. Picture that same child, now fully awake, standing in a sunlit courtyard, and notice, gently, that the far gate of that courtyard is still closed, not locked against them cruelly, simply closed, the way an old drawbridge stays raised long after the danger that once justified raising it has passed. The child inside you just woke up. The channel that receives what is waiting on the other side of that gate is still, at this moment, closed. Restoration alone, however real and however complete, is only half of what this specific chapter of your life requires. There is a second frequency, the one we already named the stress signal, and closing that gap requires both waves, in sequence, restoration first, reception after, exactly the way this entire message has been building toward from the very beginning. There is an old teaching that closes this exact gap, and I want to bring it back one more time, in full, because it has been sitting quietly underneath everything this entire message has walked you through. Become like a child first, only then receive. The child waking up is the first half of that sentence. What comes next completes it. Here is the truth of it, plainly, without any dramatic flourish, because the truth here does not need decoration to carry its own weight. The child has genuinely woken up. That is real, and nothing about what comes next takes anything away from it. But waking up was never the same as being permitted to receive, and there is a second door, still closed, standing exactly where it has stood for years. Picture that same child again, the one we described a moment ago, standing now in that same sunlit courtyard, fully awake, genuinely curious, looking toward a gate at the far wall. The gate has not moved. Nothing cruel is holding it shut. It is simply closed, the old way a drawbridge stays raised, long after whatever danger once justified. Raising it has quietly passed, forgotten by everyone except the mechanism still holding it up. That image is the entire truth of where you likely stand right now, if the first frequency has already begun waking in you through anything we have covered in this message. Awake, and still, quietly, not yet receiving. Both things true at once, and neither one cancelling out the other. Restoration and reception, together, in that order, is what the whole of this architecture is built around. Not two separate purchases stacked for the sake of stacking. Two halves of one sequence, the same sequence an old teaching described long before anyone had language for brainwaves at all. Become like a child, first, then, and only then, receive. The becoming happens through the first wave. The receiving depends entirely on the second one. There is a second discovery built by the researcher we mentioned earlier, Dr. Newton, the one who left more conventional academic paths specifically to release this particular body of work publicly. It centers on a 5-minute calibrated audio paired with something older, a 9-word phrase, a technique with roots stretching back roughly 3,300 years. carried forward here simply as an ancient method without attaching it to any single religious tradition. The audio itself works directly on lowering that high, vigilant beta pattern we described earlier, easing it down gradually, while inviting the calmer alpha pattern back into greater activity, the exact state most closely associated with genuine receptivity. The 9-word phrase functions almost like a key turning in a lock already prepared to open, spoken quietly, requiring nothing beyond your own voice and a few unhurried seconds. The research behind Dr. Newton draws on work connected to Stanford and Boston University, along with other research institutions, studying this precise relationship between nervous system state and the felt experience of actually receiving what life offers rather than reflexively pushing it away the moment it arrives. Once the channel opens, the pattern shifts in ways that tend to show up first in small, almost unremarkable moments. An opportunity arrives and, for once, nothing in you moves to talk yourself out of it. A compliment lands and stays landed instead of being handed straight back. It is called the wealth signal, and its entire purpose is completing exactly what the first wave already began. The child wakes through the first wave. The channel opens through the second. Two researchers, working independently, arriving at two different halves of the very same restoration, described here in the exact order, an old teaching described long before either of them was ever born. Become like a child, and then receive. Here is the honest question you might be asking right now, and it deserves a direct answer rather than a dodge. Why would restoring one frequency and reception together require two separate pieces instead of one? The plain answer is this. One frequency without the other has always produced a half result. Restoration alone wakes the child, but leaves the gate closed. Reception alone opens a channel, but there is no fully awakened child yet present to actually walk through it. Only together, in sequence, does either one complete what it was actually built to do. That single answer is the entire reason this is built as two waves rather than one, not for the sake of having two things to offer. Because the underlying architecture we described from the very first minutes of this message has always had two separate parts, and pretending otherwise would only leave you exactly where countless single fix attempts have already left you before. Complete restoration is not one option sitting among three equal choices on a shelf. It is the conclusion this entire message has been walking toward from its very first sentence. The child wakes, the channel opens. Both waves, in their fixed order, are what an ending actually requires before it can be called permanent rather than temporary. This is the path the whole story has been pointing toward the entire time. Restoration first, waking the frequency of wonder that was dimmed since childhood. Reception second, opening the channel that lets good things actually land instead of slipping through your hands the way they always have before. Together, they complete exactly what an old teaching described long before anyone had language for brainwaves at all. The child becomes a child again, and then, finally, receives. For some of you, only the first wave is what you need right now, and I want to say that plainly and respectfully. If restoring your wonder, your curiosity, your sense of magic in ordinary life is the piece calling to you most loudly in this moment, the Genius Song on its own is a genuine and complete place to begin. It is not a lesser path. It is simply the first step of the same journey, not a separate destination. And there is a smaller group listening right now for whom the child never actually went fully to sleep. If wonder has stayed alive in you all along, and what you have been missing is only the ability to actually receive what life keeps offering, the wealth signal alone may be exactly the piece meant for you specifically. That door is below this message as well. But for most of you listening, Both frequencies have quietly dimmed together over the same years in the same order, which is exactly why restoring both together in sequence is what closes this chapter permanently rather than halfway. 2 waves, 1 order, 1 completed restoration. Alongside both audios, there are additional resources included to support the exact restoration we have described. One built around protecting the next generation from ever experiencing this same decline, and a second collecting 20 documented stories from people who walked this same 2-wave sequence before you. Together, these bring the total value, included well past $400, offered simply as part of walking this complete path. Whatever concern about risk might still be sitting quietly in the back of your mind, here is where that concern gets fully addressed. Every path here carries a 90-day guarantee, complete, unconditional, no explanation required, no product to return, and every resource included stays with you in full, even if you choose a refund for any reason at all. Alongside that, tens of thousands of people have already walked one or both of these waves, and the number who requested a refund sits under 5 in 100, according to the publisher records for each program. There is nothing complicated required of you here, no new habit to build from scratch, no discipline to maintain. Simply listen, a few minutes each day, delivered instantly by email the moment you choose a path, with nothing shipped and nothing recurring billed afterward. Think for a moment about what people usually spend chasing this same restoration through other means. A weekend retreat asks for a full weekend away from your life. A multi-week course in prosperity thinking asks for weeks of scheduled sessions, evening after evening. A season of one-on-one coaching or biofeedback work often stretches across months of appointments. Compared to any of that, what is being asked of you here is roughly 12 minutes a day and nothing more. That morning we stood inside together earlier in this message, the one where something good arrived and nothing in you moved to refuse it. Moves one day further away for every single day. These 2 frequencies stay exactly where they currently sit. This is not a threat, and nothing here is trying to frighten you into anything. It is simply true the way any real cost of waiting is true, quietly, without drama. The version of you who has already walked through both waves is not a stranger. It is you, slightly further down the same road, looking back at this exact moment as the place everything genuinely turned. Nothing about walking that path bought you courage you did not already have. It simply removed what had been quietly blocking it the entire time. Everything described in this message sits together in one place. Both original audios built on real research, every bonus mentioned, the full guarantee behind all of it. Nowhere else carries this exact combination, assembled this exact way, and it sits directly in the description beneath this message and in the comment pinned to the top. Pause here with me for one moment. Take a slow breath in and let it out slower than you took it in. Ask yourself honestly, without performing an answer for anyone. Which sentence feels truer for you right now? The child in me has been asleep for a very long time. Or, the child in me is awake but has never quite been able to reach what belongs to it. Whichever one you just felt, your own spirit already knows the answer, and nothing needs to be rushed from here. The paths we have described are waiting beneath this message, and in the comment pinned above it, both places leading to the exact same door. Whichever path is calling you, trust what you are feeling right now more than any argument I could make for you. And one more thing, for anyone listening who feels called to go even further down this same road. There is an amplified version of the restoration audio built for those who want the wonder frequency activated with even greater depth, and a faster version of the reception audio designed to open that same channel more quickly For those already deep into this particular season, you will find both of these, if they are relevant to you, only after you have already stepped through the door we have been describing throughout this message. The original path we have walked through together is already complete on its own. These simply exist for the small number of people whose own journey asks them to go deeper still, if their own spirit confirms that is the case for them. Everything we have covered together in this message stands complete without either of those additional pieces. They are not required, and nothing about the core restoration depends on them in any way. Before we close, let us pause here together for a moment, simply to notice everything that has already shifted across the time we have spent together, not to rush toward anything else, simply to notice, quietly, gratefully, what has already moved. There is a kind of gratitude that requires no specific reason, no external cause you can point to and explain, simply a quiet recognition that something in you has been present this entire time, waiting, patient, never actually leaving even during the years it felt most absent. That patience deserves acknowledgement before we go any further. Whatever weight you have carried into this message, whatever old chapter kept quietly reopening no matter how many times you tried to close it, I want you to picture it now, one final time, resting in your open hands. Feel its actual weight, honestly, for just a moment longer. And now, gently, without force, without needing to understand exactly how, let it go. Picture your hands opening, slowly, and that weight simply falling away. The way a stone released over a ledge falls without any further effort required from the one who released it. You do not have to carry it down with your own strength. You only have to open your hands. Say this to yourself now, quietly, in your own voice, in whatever words feel most true to you. I am the child who woke up. I am the hand that finally opened. I am the one this chapter was always going to release, in its own time, in its own order, exactly as it is releasing now. You are not who that old chapter said you were. You are the one it was always, quietly, preparing to set free. Restoration came first, reception followed. And what stood between you and this exact moment was never distance. It was only ever sequence, and the sequence has finally, completely, run its full course. If everything we have walked through together today has moved something real in you, let that movement carry you toward whichever path is calling you. Restoration, reception, or both together, waiting in the description beneath this message and in the comment pinned above it. Whatever you choose, choose it from this place of clarity, not from urgency, and not from anything other than your own quiet knowing. And so it is. There is one more thing I want to leave you with, because it belongs to the small number of you who have stayed all the way to this final moment, having walked through every part of this message from its very first word. That kind of presence is rare, and it deserves one final word spoken directly to you alone. Remember that morning we stood inside together earlier? The one where something good was offered and nothing in you moved to refuse it. That morning is still there, waiting, exactly as real as it felt the first time we pictured it together. For some of you, that was simply an image, gentle and pleasant, nothing more. For a few of you, listening closely enough to notice, it was something closer to recognition, a moment your own body responded to before your mind had finished deciding what it meant. You already know, quietly, which one it was for you. Whichever path is calling you, it waits beneath this message, and in the comment pinned above it, ready whenever you are, with no pressure attached to when or whether you walk through it. Let that be enough for now. Go gently from here, chosen one, carrying both frequencies, a little more awake than they were when this message began, the wonder restoring, the reception opening, in exactly the order that was always going to set you free. I want to say a final word of thanks to whoever named this exact chapter, whoever kept quietly checking whether it was really over, whoever refused to settle for a half ending simply because it looked finished from the outside. That refusal to settle was never a flaw in you. It was the most accurate instinct you have carried this entire time. And it led you, eventually, all the way to this exact message at exactly the right moment for you to hear it. There is something worth saying plainly about what happens next. After this message ends, life will continue exactly as it was going to continue, with its ordinary mixture of good days and harder ones. What has changed, if you have walked through this message honestly, is not the weather of your life. It is your capacity to meet that weather from a place that no longer automatically drags you back into the same old story every single time a storm passes through. That capacity is not fragile, and it does not depend on remembering every single word of this message perfectly. It depends on the small practices we walked through together, the pause before reacting, the noticing of curiosity, the single word yes spoken instead of an automatic no, the naming of an old pattern out loud, the moment you notice it, trying to return. Return to those practices whenever you need them, as often as you need them, for as long as you need them. I think one final time of that old teaching, become like a child, then receive. You have spent this entire message becoming, slowly, deliberately, one small act of noticing at a time. And you have practiced receiving, in small doses, a breath, a compliment allowed to land, a memory allowed to surface without judgment. Both halves, practiced together, are what closes a chapter permanently rather than temporarily. Whatever you choose to do next, whether you explore either path waiting beneath this message or simply carry forward everything we have already covered together at no further cost, know this clearly. You are not the same person who began listening to this message. Something in you has already shifted, quietly, the way real change almost always arrives, without fanfare, without a single dramatic before and after moment, simply present now where it was dimmer before. Chosen one, it is over. Not because time simply passed, and not because you were finally strong enough to force it closed through sheer will. It is over because two frequencies, dimmed since childhood, have begun waking in their correct order, restoration first, reception following, exactly the way an old teaching described long before either researcher in this message was ever born. And once both are awake, fully, in sequence, an ending